Welcome to Development Desk, a space where parenting meets psychology, advocacy meets action, and insight replaces the noise. I'm Anna, a school psychologist and mom, sharing what I've learned from years inside the system and alongside families. Together, we'll unpack the why behind the behavior, decode the school processes, and build something strong, one conversation at a time. From insight to action, from chaos to clarity, this is Development Desk. The information shared on Development Desk is for educational and informational purposes only. While I am a licensed school psychologist, this podcast does not constitute psychological services, legal advice, or therapeutic relationship. The views expressed are my own and do not reflect the policies or positions of any school district or employer. This content is not a substitute for professional consultation with a qualified provider in your state. Always seek appropriate support when making decisions related to your child's education, health, or legal rights. Development Desk. I am wanting to touch on something that I feel like a lot of parents feel lost when they go to meetings. So on our Let's Talk About episode today, I wanted to talk about IEPs. And the importance of you being a part of that meeting and the importance of you taking notes and having your paperwork together for that. IEPs can be very overwhelming, even for us in the school. The paperwork, it's a lot. There's a lot to prepare for, but it's a very important plan that the district and the parent are coming together to agree on what the child needs. So it's a very important piece of document. It's a legally binding document, and sometimes they're 20 pages long and sometimes they're 50 pages long. So first, to start off with, the IEP stands for Individual Education Plan. So this plan should be very individualized to your child's strengths and needs and services. I know there's so much jargon in special education, so many acronyms, and I want us to break some of that down in today's episode. We have these annual IEP meetings. So every year, new plan is put into place and reviewed, updated. Now, that's not to say if you have concerns within that year of the IEP. So let's say you have an IEP in April, you come back to school the next year. It's technically not due until March or April. But if you have concerns as a parent or the school has some concerns, then they might call a meeting in December or November, and we might call that a revision IEP. So that's still not a full annual IEP. We're just revising a few things, or maybe there's an amendment, and that doesn't even require a meeting. But today, what we're going to really be focusing on is that annual IEP, or an annual ARD, as some people call an ARD process, an ARD process. And ARD stands for Admission, Review, Dismissal. And so at these meetings, you are either admitting a student into special education, reviewing, which is that annual IEP, or you are dismissing a student from special education. Okay. And so at this ARD meeting, we will be doing the annual IEP. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And at these annual IEP meetings, we have a parent that is at the meeting, unless you have waived your right, your participation. You've given permission for the school to move on with the meeting without you for whatever reason. You might be busy, or they've already reviewed the draft with you and you agree, and so you can't come to the meeting. But overall, a parent is attending the meeting. The school cannot move forward with that meeting without your permission to proceed or without you being involved in that meeting. Next is a district representative. That could be a special education coordinator. That could be a vice principal. That can be an academic dean. That can be a principal. A district representative is also a voting member along with the parent. They are voting in response for the district. They are saying, yes, the district can provide these services. We have the appropriate resources to provide these services that are being proposed at today's meeting, right? And then you have a general education teacher, preferably your own child's teacher. Sometimes due to staffing or teacher absences, it might be a different teacher that your child does not have, but hopefully it's your child's teacher, general education teacher. And then you have a special education teacher in that meeting. Depending on if your child has related services such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, counseling as a related service with a licensed profession counselor or a school psychologist, those people will also be invited. A school psychologist is not always at an annual IEP. The only time a school psychologist is going to be at a meeting is if we're reviewing evaluation or if we are doing counseling on that student that is being discussed that day. Now, the other thing is if we know that a parent has some concerns or is bringing a new evaluation, wanting more evaluation, then a school psychologist would also come to the meeting. Okay. And then why you belong in the room. Okay, so I know I kept emphasizing that we need you in the room or we need your permission to proceed without. A parent's participation in the meeting is so critical because your insights as a parent, it tells us what their daily life looks like, what their strengths are, what their needs are. We only get to see them for a few hours in a day. And if they're in middle school and high school, their teachers are only seeing them for 45 minutes to an hour a day. So we need your insight and your input as a parent in these meetings because important context can be missed if we don't get your input. Just like our evaluations, our school evaluations, a large component is parent interview and parent input. It gives us a bigger picture of the student outside of school and what life is like outside of school. So there was a time when I was at a meeting and it was a younger student and the teacher was stating that they're really struggling to advocate. They will not speak up. They're very quiet. And the parent says, What do you mean? My child is very vocal at home, is very comfortable, constantly tells me what their needs and wants. So we then knew, okay, this is very isolated. The child has to build rapport with the staff to be able to advocate for their needs. So that's just one small example of how it can give us insight into that child and that student to better understand. Maybe they work better with this adult, or they need to build more relationship with that adult, tangible rewards, positive reinforcements. And your input is super critical to your child's success in this plan. And then some key things to watch for in this annual IEP, because again, there's so much that they review. And I'm not going to go over every single thing that they review in today's episode because that would be really extremely boring for you. If you need more information from what this podcast is giving you, please feel free to reach out, send me an email, send me a DM on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we can connect and answer some more questions. So I'm just giving some broad information that every parent should know going into an IEP meeting. So the first things to watch for in this meeting is you'll have introductions, and then they'll start to talk about how the child's qualifying for special education, and the general education teacher will typically talk about how they're doing in their class. And they'll talk about PLAFs. PLAFs stands for Present Levels of Academic Achievement, Functional Performance. Basically, their current level of functioning when it comes to academics and function and behavior. So how are they doing in math? What are their strengths in math? What are their needs? What are some of their weaknesses in math? What are their strengths and needs in writing, in reading? What are their strengths and needs in behavior? What are their strengths and needs in functional performance? Like completing tasks on time, fidgeting, attention, executive functioning. So these PLAFs, these present levels of performance in these areas really drive the IEP along with the evaluation. So these PLAFs tell us where they're doing great at and where they're needing support. And if they are needing support, and if these PLAFs are saying, you know what, Johnny's really struggling with his behavior, he can't keep his hands to himself, or Johnny's really struggling with math facts fluency, but he's doing great everywhere else. There's no other needs. He's on grade level for everything else. Then that's telling us that we need goals in those needs, those areas. We need measurable annual goals. So that's when the IEP meeting will then move into those goals. So goals, again, are based off of that school evaluation that tells us what their needs are. So if a student has a learning disability in reading, they sure as hell better have a reading goal. Please make sure your child has a reading goal if they have a learning disability in reading, right? And so if there's no needs in reading from what the PLAF is saying, then you need a request for an evaluation. My kid has a learning disability in reading, but the teacher is saying there's no needs or weaknesses in reading in class. This is not aligning. We need an evaluation. Okay. So your goals are based off the student eligibility, but also their needs in class. So they don't have ADHD, but they're showing some inattentiveness in class. You can still build a goal without having a disability or eligibility in ADHD. I hope that makes sense. So then after the goals are put into place and everyone votes that they're appropriate, that they're useful, they're very clear and specific, then we would move into the services. So do these minutes match my kids' services? Since we're on the example of reading, let's say we're back to our student that has a reading disability. And if my child is showing consistently that they're 2 grade levels below reading, I want to have service minutes. My child needs to be pulled out for reading intervention or specialized SDI, right? Specialized direct instruction, specialized instruction, special education. Either they need to be pulled out or I need some type of special education teacher going into the classroom to support them. What do these minutes look like? And is that enough for my student? Again, it is so critical for you as parents to really be invested in this meeting to have these conversations. There's so many parents that have left ARD meetings, IEP meetings, and a few months later, they're like, wait a minute. I thought they were being pulled out and they were working with a reading specialist. Oh no, Mom, you signed right here that you were okay with them getting in-class support. So they haven't been pulled out for reading, but you signed that. But it's important to be invested in these meetings to understand those services minutes that are for your child. And again, we as school personnel don't expect you to understand all the lingo. So if you don't understand in-class support or co-teach, ask, can you give me an explicit example of what that means? Because I'm not understanding that. And again, as I've said before, as a school psychologist, I'll go into my child's IEP meetings and I will ask them the same thing. I'm sorry, I've never heard that term before in the 11 years I've been in this field. Would you please give me an explicit example of what that verbiage means? Parents, that's okay to admit that we don't always know everything. We got to get it explained. It's better for us to ask those questions in the meeting than later on down the road think that our child was getting these services that they weren't, right? Okay. Now, accommodations. So accommodations and modifications are very different. How are we accommodating my child? Are they getting speech to text or text to speech? Are they getting highlighted words? Are they getting small group testing? When we are changing the curriculum, we are now, instead of giving my third grader third grade level curriculum, I'm now giving them first grade level curriculum. So that is completely modifying the curriculum. We really don't want to be modifying curriculum unless we have extremely good data to show that they need it, because then you're going to be pushing your kid back. That's a whole nother episode. But are these accommodations that are being proposed by the committee, are they practical and consistent? Again, as a parent, you've got to step back and think, I don't want to over accommodate my child. If I'm over accommodating them, I could be holding them back, right? Especially when they're getting to middle school and high school. Do they really need small group testing? Do they really need for a teacher to be reading to them or for a teacher to be reminding them to stay on task? When I want my child to be ready for college or for a job in the future, so we really want to be intentional with these accommodations. Are they practical? Is my kid really using them? Does my kid really need them, right? And as your child gets older, middle school, high school, they're going to be a part of this meeting. Once they're 13 years or older, they're invited to the IEP meeting, and their voice and buy-in is also important. Do you need this support? Do you need this help? Are you using it? And then progress. How are we measuring if my child is meeting this goal, are needing these accommodations? What does that progress look like? And it's this part I feel like gets overlooked a lot in school districts where teachers don't specifically have how they're keeping progress on this goal. And so that's a really important question to have for your special education teacher or your general education teacher. Now, I've put out a lot of TikTok videos about this because it's such a hot topic in the beginning of the school year. And this is about keeping records. Now, you keeping records gives a school district a long-term story. Okay. And you're showing them data, years of data to show that this is where my child was. This is how they progress. This is what works. This is what doesn't work. I keep my child's information in emails and in Google Drive so that that to me is just easily accessible. So whatever works for you, be sure to organize that, whether it be a binder, whether it be in your emails. You want to keep track of those 3-year evaluations. You want to keep track of those annual IEPs. If you can keep track of reports, communication, progress notes, even better. But at the very least, evaluations and IEPs. Now, I've had people reach out to me on social media as to why doesn't the school keep track of this? Great point. So, schools do have a legal obligation to keep track of it. You are right. Do they? Not always. There is staff turnover. There is a change in tech systems. And so then things get lost or overlooked and they're not found. So Texas does have a system that they use. It's called T-Rex, and registrars have this system. I think, don't quote me, again, I'm not an attorney, but it's my understanding that legally a school district has 30 days to get records to the receiving district after they keep asking. They ask like 3 times over the course of 30 days. The school district has to get it to them. Do they always? No, they don't. At the end of the day, this is your child, your child's education, your child's future. And at the end of the day, that's not my kid or the district's kid, right? You're living with your kid. You are going to be living with the future of your kid and whatever that looks like. So as a parent, we need to take also that responsibility of these are legal documents that are being put together for my child to show data on how they progress and what works for them. Why would I not keep track of this? Why would I not take responsibility for this? Okay, that's a little tough love, but I'm just going to be real with you guys, okay? You are the one that is responsible for your child's education, career, and future, right? Partly, right? Partly. Of course, your child has responsibility in that too, right? And so even though it is a school's legal obligation, things happen. Things get lost. And you can play the blame game all you want, but it's your child that's going to be hurting at the end of the day. Okay, now, you don't need to be an expert in law to be a part of these meetings. You just need to know your child, okay? Even if you forget all of these points that I've gone through, the PLAFs, the goals, the services, the accommodations, at the end of the day, you just need to show up and give your input as the parent. It doesn't matter what level of education you are. It doesn't matter how ready you are for this meeting or how much you know, don't know. What's important is that your kids have you there to speak for them and advocate for them, okay? Attending, asking questions, staying curious in advocacy, not defensive, staying curious is really going to make a huge difference in these IEP meetings. And every meeting is practiced. You're going to get more and more confident and comfortable for each meeting. When I'm at elementary meetings with the parents that just entered special education, and then I see it when I go to high school, and these parents have been through this over and over and over every year. They know what questions to ask. They know what works for their child. It is going to get easier over time as far as comfortability and understanding. And so I think what I would like for a closing reflection for parent is what's one question that you can bring to your next IEP meeting? Kind of like when you're preparing for an interview, And they always say, like, have a question ready for the person that's interviewing you so that you're showing curiosity and interest. And that could go the same way for an IEP meeting. Show that, come with a question. What is that question that you want answered? How is my child getting help? Who is helping my child? What services are they getting? What interventions are they getting? How have you been keeping track of progress? These are all really great questions to come to an IEP meeting. And that way you might feel a little bit more prepared if you're coming with one question. But again, I think it's so important to enter into an IEP meeting knowing that you are your child's best advocate. And the school is, for the most part,
Sure.
you do have some bad apples, but for the most part, school personnel want to do best by you and your child. And so let's partner together for your child and build the best plan for them that we can. So I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have any further questions or want to elaborate in any way that I have explained on here, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to do so. See you next time.